Gnosticism. This is easily the most requested video topic I've ever seen on my channel, both in comments, private messages, and a repeated insistence from a recently incarcerated JoJo character. Don't ask, it's a running joke on the channel. So, with all these requests going out for this video topic, why have I put off writing a script for the religious philosophy which, on paper, seems simple enough to explain? Well, that's because I'm a detail-oriented, pedantic asshole, and I knew the moment I even tried an attempt at explaining Gnosticism, what is a very simple subject matter would soon turn into a complicated web of interconnected ideas and a lot, and I mean a lot, of research, rescripting, re-recording, and especially editing.
Please don't.
And to be very frank with all of you, I didn't feel like I was up to the task. However, my hand has been forced via the request of Patreon backer Nomifer, who, in his donation of well over $50 to the channel, like, holy shit dude, you good? Has earned the right to demand a full-length Gnosticism video. Just a reminder, if there is a mythological topic you'd like me to cover in any one of my videos, link to my Patreon is down below, where that right is, tentatively, reserved for $10 plus patrons. So if you'd like to bully me into submission, or you just want to support the channel, that's a great place to do it. Or, you know, you could just buy merch and have people wonder who that sexy fellow you are modeling for is. Anyways, thanks again to Nomifer and all these other Patreon names over here for all the support. And let's get into this. So picture this. It's now the 6th century, BC. You're Jewish and you've just been liberated from under the tyrannical boot heel of literally Lucifer by a dude with a sick-ass goatee in an empire whose state religion is practically sticking up the middle finger at moral absolutism with regard to divine figures, who is really cool about you being able to go back to your holy land and worship your monotheistic god and shit.
Get on with it!
And now, after roughly 60 years of being separated from your land of milk and honey, and being treated as a second-class citizen by your captors, you start to ponder on whether or not your god has your best intentions at heart. But then you turn to that super cool guy with a badass goatee who you have just recently appointed your messiah some 500 years before the main guy and about 2,500 years before some asshole on the internet making this very same nonsensical postulation was born. And he starts to present you with some ideas from a state religion which exonerates your absolutist god from any sort of wrongdoing by incorporating the existence of a literal scapegoat who is a dickhead anyway. And now all of your problems are solved. Minus all of them save the one we just went over. So, it should be apparent to anyone not strictly playing a game of semantics that the seed of Gnosticism predate the Second Temple era writings of Judah, and later the cult of Christ in the form of Zoroastrianism, as a religious philosophy which permeates itself within not only this period of Judaism and its subsequent evolutions, but is also present within Slavic mythology, Tengrism, and even fucking Buddhism, which in of itself is undeniably the first religion which can accurately call itself Gnostic. Essentially, at its core, Gnosticism is a rejection of the idea that any priestly class or clergy has a monopoly on morality, and the rules by which one should govern their life, trading piety for personal spiritual knowledge. Hence the name Gnosis. But what if you want to go on a journey of self-discovery to alleviate all of your religious anxieties, but still want to believe in a holy, benevolent God?
Give me a sign, Lord, if you're looking down on this poor sinner. Okay, here, there, get your panties on.
Well then, traveler, just take a page out of Zoroastrianism's book and decide that while the good God isn't actually in charge of the mortal plane, rest assured that the big man upstairs is really, upstairs, though not necessarily a man, and by rejecting the tenets of the established church in favor of finding out for yourself what is morally right or wrong, will put you in God's good graces, and allow for your spirit to ascend to a higher plane.
Stop.
That is about as simple a narrative as I can craft without labeling who's who in Gnostic Christianity. Yet. But before we get into the creation story professed by the Gnostic scripture, the secret book of John, as in John the disciple of Jesus who already wrote one of the 4 mainstream gospels, I feel like I'd be doing a disservice to the one who granted Gnosticism its namesake by not covering the second major influence over Gnostic philosophy, that being Plato and his theory of forms. Essentially, it boils down to the philosophical question as to how ash, elm, oak, birch, and what have you, can all be classified as trees at a glance, despite the fact that they all have different characteristics and in some cases look totally different from one another. And yet we can classify them all as trees.
Hey look, a talking tree.
I can do more than talk.
Well, the theory of forms postulates that an entirely separate, purely idealistic world exists out there with the perfect or original tree by which we get our ideas of what a tree is. And while none of us have ever seen said tree, we all have that knowledge or gnosis baked into our subconscious. By extension, all trees in the physical world are merely imperfect copies of that idealized tree. And what the fuck does that have to do with Gnosticism? Well, imagine if that same principle was applied to our idea of God. That would mean that the God of this world isn't a divine, supreme being and is in fact an imperfect copy of the idealized God existing within a separate, metaphysical space. That's the basic premise of Gnostic cosmology. That all gods, not just the God, are imperfect ideas conceived by more perfect beings in an idealized world which is beyond our comprehension, rather than only be viewed through the lens of imagination, and can only be accessed by hearing the spiritual truth Gnosticism provides, and accepting that the world of the physical is merely an imperfect copy of that which is ideal. Congratulations, you win! You have gained access to the world of imagination.
Are you trying to say I have no imagination?
Where I can only assume that anything you can imagine is manifested, and therefore Islam and its 40 virgins for blowing yourself up can suck it. I'ma be a fucking hentai protagonist who gets stranded on an island full of Valkyries who could kick my ass but still need my seed to progenerate and survive. Gnosticism! So as I have already alluded to, Gnosticism has its own creation story, but goes back a bit further than when the world was vast and void, to a time when there was only one truly perfect being known simply as the monad, or invisible spirit, or father of all. This formless being exists within the eternal empty cosmos, thinking only of himself, since that's all there really is to think about, until his thoughts suddenly and spontaneously usher in the existence of a new being, a sometimes female, sometimes androgynous womb of creation, by the name of Barbello. After she is born, Barbello decides that she likes this whole thinking business, and so the monad grants her the powers of foreknowledge, incorruptibility, eternal life, and truth. You may have already noted that thinking plays an important role in Gnosticism as a whole, which is a recurring theme amongst the Gnostic universe, both for its gods and also in how its practitioners are to achieve Gnosis and ascension beyond the realm of the physical and into the upper world. In fact, this is where the rest of the aeons, or products of the One, come from. After being granted the power of forethought, Barbello and the monad start to exchange ideas, the first in a tradition wherein the male supplies the form, and the female the substance. No singular aeon may produce its own thought independently, lest they break the chain of perfection which is the monad's initial intelligence. Apparently, this conversation was so fulfilling and full of dopamine that Barbello immediately became pregnant, and popped out autogenes.
It's the gates of hell! Run!
A child of light who embodies the mind, who also worked as a son to finish off the original Holy Trinity of the Father, Mother, and Son. Autogenes also went by another title, that being Christ, after he was anointed with the knowledge of the Father so that he may become yet another perfect being. And so now we're up to 3 divine beings, the monad, one essence, Barbello, forethought, and autogenes, But don't get too comfortable, we've still got an awful lot of incestuous mindfucking left to go. So after Autogenes is molded into the perfect being by his father's thoughts, he can now have babies of his own. He starts off with the 4 lights, or powers, or luminaries, whichever you like I suppose, each represented by a different planetary body. Armozel is the embodiment of the sun. He is described as the first angel and also the light Aeon by the SPJ. Oriel is the Aeon of Venus, who interestingly enough goes by the male pronouns despite Venus's traditional depiction as a feminine object. He shares a name with the pseudepigraphical angel Uriel, who is known for his iconography of carrying around a disk of the sun. Confused yet? I sure am. Davistai... Davathai is the Aeon of Mercury. Sadly, this one doesn't come down to his humanity in the form of an old man or several old men to teach us about alchemy, astronomy, and whatever other pseudoscience white girls to go nuts over. By the way, let me know if hermeticism is something you guys would like to see in the cards for a future video, since this one set up the precedent for religious philosophy rather than purely cosmology, I guess. And finally, we have El-Elith, the Aeon of the Moon and... cows? I couldn't find an explanation for this one anywhere. El-Elith is unique within the Luminaries, as she actually shows up again later in the SPJ, but may also have been mentioned in the Gospel of Judas, which I promise you, have some patience, we're getting there, by the title El, which carries with it connotations denoting him as a much higher being than just a paltry angel. However, this is based off the old Canaan lore, which influenced the earthly Yahweh, who, spoiler alert, is actually the bad guy in this version of the story. Making it unsurprising that one biblical narrative which remained untouched is the story of Nimrod / Zoroaster / Snorri's Bible fanfiction antagonist from the Tower of Babel. A marvel of human engineering only possible via the people of the world coming together under one language. However, Yaldabaoth confounded these people's tongues and humanity was forced to abandon their project. But the dream still lives on. And you, yes, you, dear viewer, can fight back against the forces of the false god with today's sponsor, Babbel. Babbel is a free language learning tool which allows you to learn a new language at your own pace, for a fraction of the cost of a traditional college course. Not to mention, studies have shown that Babbel is even more effective at helping you learn than by traditional methods anyway, with only about 10 minutes a day. So there is literally no reason not to sign up. Learning a new language is the building block to help you become a more well-rounded and communicable person so that you can move out of your mother's basement and into the stars. Literally, we need to bring back the Tower of Babel project, and the only way to do it is for you to go to the link in the description with the coupon code and save a whopping 60% on your Babbel subscription so that you can be like me and learn a new language the fun way. Through games! Oh yeah, I love this one. This is the one where you have to speak the language properly, otherwise a whole bunch of people get derailed and die in a fiery train accident. Let's go! Auf Wiedersehen. Mir ist gut. No! Mein Name ist Robinson. Wie geht's Ihnen? Wie geht's dir? Oh, okay, I won. Yeah! All dies natürlich auf Deutsch, die Sprache der Liebe. Or, if that's not your thing, for some reason, Babbel also has language learning exercises, podcasts, interactive videos, and even virtual classes to help you get started. So what are you waiting for? Again, you can follow the link in the description to start learning in the language of your choice today for 60% off. Thanks so much to Babbel for sponsoring today's video, and we're right back at it. Accompanying these 4 luminaries are 3 more Aeons, each representative of some other aspect of thought. With Armazel, there is grace, truth, and form. Oriel gets conception, perception, and memory. My Thai friend Dave is the boss man of understanding, love, and idea. And El Elith presides over perfection, peace, and wisdom, who is also known as Sophia because she actually does something later. The final creation of the monad in this sphere of creation was the primal man called Geradamus, or Pigera Adamus, both roughly meaning the ancient Adam. Please note that this Adam is different from the Genesis Adam, as he is not only androgynous, but also the name Adamus has an entirely different meaning here, as it is meant to go by the Greek word meaning steel. Hence, Adam is the man of steel, or the adamantine man for his solid and incorruptible nature. Sir Adamantine was placed over the Aeons in the first eternal realm, and because it wouldn't be a mythology without a bit of nepotism, he puts his son, Seth, again, different from the biblical Seth, we'll get into that in just a second, in the second eternal realm over Oriel. The seed of Seth, he doesn't get a proper name, gets put into the third sphere over Dave, where the appointed Gnostic saints were to go later after they died. And El Elith gets to chill out with all the other mortal schmucks who escape from the relentless reincarnation cycle of the Demiurge through their own gnosis. I would say put a pin in that one for later, but we're about to get into that right now. So, the Demiurge is our primary antagonist in Gnostic philosophy. Don't be fooled by his appearance as a snake with a lion's head, which is unironically and nonsensically one of the cutest things I think I have ever seen, and I really want to pet its little lion head and watch its little snake tail wag around like a dog while doing it. But don't do that, because he's... Going a little heavy-handed with these SpongeBob references. The Demiurge, whose proper name is Yaldabaoth, was birthed from Sophia, the Aeon of Wisdom I mentioned earlier for a reason. Sophia wanted to bring forth a being purely from thought without the consent of the spirit, her consort. Consent is actually a pretty big theme in Gnosticism, as it actually comes up a bit later on once we get into Cain and Abel, but again, please put a pin in that one for later. You may have noted the similarities to the name of the Demiurge and the Jewish god Yahweh, and that is because they are one and the same being. Yeah, that's really not much of a surprise. So apparently whoever wrote the secret gospel, trust me, it was not the biblical John, was a bit of a skeptic, and while pursuing his Talmud, he must have thought to himself, wow, this god guy is kind of a dick. And so we contextualized him as a lion-headed snake creature who resides under the realm of the perfect aeons, born from ignorance of a higher being to become a being of blatant ignorance who literally idolizes himself not only a god, but the god. Now, Yaldabaoth's name is a pretty complicated thing to try and dissect. So let's start with the word demiurge, which comes from the Greek word demiurgos, meaning public worker, when taken literally. Though in the context of the boy-chasing society, means something akin to craftsman or workman, a title given to this false god, as despite the fact that he is hidden away from the true perfection of the aeons, he still managed to fashion for him a material, albeit imperfect world called the Matrix. No, I am not shitting you. That whole movie, cosmologically as well as thematically, is a euphemism for Gnosticism. Enjoy being the smartest person in the room at your next sweaty back mouth breathing convention. Yaldabaoth's name can be broken down into two parts. Yah, which means Lord, God, or later Jupiter in accordance with the Romans, or Baoth, or possibly Sabbath, meaning army or possibly even hosts, thus making Yaldabaoth's name meaning God of armies or hosts. However, there is also another possibility behind his name, the Hebrew phrase Yildeboy, which literally means yellow boy. Combining the two meanings, we can interpret his name as the yellow, or possibly golden, boy of hosts, a sort of connotation as the original fallen angel, which is very similar to the description of Satan we get through the later Christian writings, denoting him as a previous right hand of God who was overtaken by his own feelings of pride into believing that he was greater than God himself. Kind of like Yaldabaoth's folly. From this, we can gather that Yaldabaoth is both the inspiration for the New Testament Satan and possibly the King in Yellow, which again, the local D&D store will be impressed by your knowledge of. Just don't mention this factoid on a first date. Oh, what am I saying? You watch Messiahs and Mythology, you can't get a date. Anyhow, thinking that he is God because he is ignorant, later willingly, of the true nature of the universe and his place in it, Yaldabaoth creates a more lesser, imperfect aeons, or archaeons, like himself, out of the flame of the luminous fire, wherever the hell that came from, to join him in his court and exalt him. Longtime viewers of this channel will instantly recognize these beings as being analogous to the angels of the Lord, who, in accordance to some doctrines, conveniently written about the same time as this, state that Jehovah created the angels from fire, with Islam later expanding that the jinns were created from the smoke of that divine fire, but I digress. So not only do we have a false god and fake angels, it's time for Gnostics to kick off their version of Genesis. So, Yaldabaoth, seemingly letting the curtain slip on just how much he really knows about the broader universe, famously declares, "I am a jealous god, and there is no other god beside me." Woo! Fuck yeah! God is good! God is great! Yeah, wait, who would he have to be jealous of? Woo! And thus, as the minions of Yaldabaoth begin to doubt their divine creator's words, Barbello calls out from the upper realm, sending ripples through the fabric of reality as we know it, allowing these archaeons to glance beyond the veil of the Matrix into what is beyond. So, yeah, she essentially red-pilled them. And who should the archaeons take a glance at other than Garadamus, the primordial, perfect, conceptual image of a man, the very sight of which is more than enough to enrage these pretenders into attempting to craft their own man, made in the same vein of the man they saw in the void. And so, Yaldabaoth's 365 archaeons all pitch in, eventually crafting Adam, or at the very least, the body of Adam. So now we're about to get into a little bit of discrepancy regarding Yaldabaoth. So after the Archaeons build their own Adam, they request that he breathe life into their creation, essentially giving him a soul, only for him to deny that he has one like the edgy piece of shit he is in the Testament of Adam and Eve. Of course, Yaldabaoth is able to do this because, well, I mean, we exist, but it doesn't make sense, seeing as Yaldabaoth is born purely from the thought of a divine soul, and so therefore he shouldn't be able to do this. SBJ kinda elaborates on this, explaining that Yaldabaoth's breath carries with it some of the divinity of Sophia, though because Yaldabaoth is so ignorant of his divine conception, well, semi-divine, he thought he did it all by himself, implying that Yaldabaoth, despite all of his faults, is still a very powerful being and has powers even he can't comprehend due to his own short-sightedness. So, bear with me here a second, because the story gets really wacky from here, and a lot of shit seemingly happens all at once. So when Adam has his soul blown into him, it allowed for him to communicate with the upper realm, meaning that he, potentially, could have become a perfect Aeon. In lieu of this, Barbello sends down the manifestations of life, called Epinoa, to inhabit Adam's body and guide him in the ways of Gnosticism so that he may also escape the Matrix and be with the Aeons. However, seeing that their creation was getting to be way smarter than the rest of them, the Archaeons tried to bury Adam under the earth so that he would become mortal. Hence he rose from the dust and was called Adamus. However, Epinoa was still within him. Thinking that they had succeeded in making their creation totally submissive and breedable, they hoisted Adam into the Paradise Land, obviously the Garden of Eden. However, Yaldabaoth, again, showing he's not as stupid as he leads on, figures out that there's something amiss within this mortal Adam and tries to grab at Epinoa and rip her out from the man, though finds that he is incapable of doing so, and so just manifests another creature out of Adam's rib in her likeness, that being Eve. Sorry, boys and girls, Lilith isn't in this one. Now capable of physically harming Epinoa, Forethought swoops in to the rescue, taking the life force out of Eve and taking her back to the realm of the Aeons before he can do her any real harm, but makes sure to leave behind a certain tree with a certain provocative fruit which invokes knowledge within those who eat it. Yaldabaoth then orders that Adam and Eve are to never eat from this tree, hence they regain the Gnosis necessary to return to the upper realm. So that's it then. The snake which tempted Eve to taste the fruit of the tree of the garden is actually a benevolent spirit sent by the Aeons to bring Adam and Eve on the right track? Well, no. Actually, Jesus clarifies this to John and says that the serpent wanted Adam to gain knowledge, quote, so that he may be useful to him. Which means that the snake was really, actually, who the fuck are you? Like, his existence isn't elaborated on at all here. We're just left to infer quite a few things. Was the snake a third party separate from both Yaldabaoth and the Aeons, who is morally gray and seeks to possess the physical world for himself? Is he a disgruntled angel who turned away from Yaldabaoth after the Aeons proved that he is a lying, imperfect being? Or...
Who was it? Who could it possibly be? Was it... oh, I don't know. Satan?
Probably not. But the fact that this character is still a part of the story, which is signaled out by the literal main character of the whole religion, leads me to believe that the snake wasn't merely some symbolic representation of the temptation which faces all men to know better about oneself, or some fortune cookie bullshit like that. Whoever the hell he is, the serpent, much like the original rendition of this tale, succeeded in severely pissing Yaldabaoth off. And so Adam and Eve were condemned for being somewhat smart now, and were kicked out of the garden. However, now we get into another biblical revision wherein Yaldabaoth, through questionable levels of consent, impregnates Eve with two sons, named Elohim, also called Cain, and Yav or Yahweh, also known as Abel. Now, while you might think that these are the same Cain and Abel from Genesis, you couldn't be further from the truth, as since both these lads were conceived via this evil, adorable little snake-head demigod, of course their appearance is going to be fucking weird too. So, in the Gnostic canon, Cain has the body of a man and the face of a bear, and Abel has a face of a cat. Also, in this version of events, there is no fratricide via unspecified means. Abel is sent forth as a sort of a pseudo-god of winds and fire, while Cain was sent over the waters and the earth. And then they just kinda fuck off. Only in Gnosticism can you have a Slavic mythology nerd's wet dream of a deity passively referenced and then subsequently dropped from the narrative as quickly as he shows up. However, most of you are good boys and girls who read your Bible, attend Sunday school, and make burnt offerings of weight gain powder to Korean Jesus, who should already know that Adam and Eve in the traditional Abrahamic religions have 3 sons. Well, in Gnosticism, Adam ends up only having 1 son, the boy named Seth. This is where the theme of consent comes back into focus. Whereas Cain and Abel are born from Yaldabaoth raping Eve, thus essentially making them the result of only one parent's will, since Seth was conceived by parents who actually wanted to fuck each other, and because Adam and Eve still had somewhat of a divine spark within them, Seth was born in the perfect image of the Seth from a higher plane, essentially making him a divine being whose purpose is to be the father to all humans, who possess the capacity to attain Gnosis and break Yaldabaoth's hold on humanity. Now, obviously, this is a problem for the big snake man on the middle floor, as with Seth's children all embracing this new age philosophy of God being a dick, they aren't exactly about to fall on their knees and worship to him. So, substantially pissed off by this, he starts setting in motion a plan to flood the earth and rid himself of the vermin. However, Barbello swoops in and comes to the rescue yet again, forewarning Noah of the impending flood and tells him to gather all who will listen in a hidden place. JC straight up tells John that Moses was bullshitting about the ark, much to the dismay of Bill Nye and Ken Ham, for two polarly opposite reasons, and instead Noah and all those who did listen to him were saved by the divine cloud sent by Gnostic Uber. From that point on, humanity consisted solely of the immovable race, which isn't very immovable, as we're about to see, those who both knew of aeons in the upper realm and followed their divine wisdom accordingly. So in a way, Yaldabaoth kind of boned himself even worse by flooding the earth. However, instead of just trying again, rainbows and their supposed significance here are absent from the Gnostic narrative, he sets in motion a new plan, which is to send his angels, not the fallen ones, down to Earth to mate with the mortal women so that the human race would again become corrupt. Essentially what John is doing here is flipping the script, making the birth of the Nephilim come after the flood, as opposed to before. And so the world now exists as it does today, with humanity at a crossroads as to what they should decide to believe and where their eternal soul should reside forever. You see, humanity, according to Jesus, is divided into three categories: Gnostics, refusals, and those who have turned away. Gnostics are those who listen to the ideas of the world being divided into a hierarchy of aeons and archaeons, and who embrace Gnosis as a form of salvation so that when they die, they may join the luminous ones in the upper realms. Refusals are those who, not unlike a majority of you at home, have heard of Gnosticism and all the lessons that it preaches, but thinks of it more as a cute idea which they don't really humor too much, and so they are compelled to repeat their lives yet again through reincarnation until they eventually become Gnostics in a later life. Then you have the rejectors, who hear of the tenets of Gnosticism and deem them to be heretical, and those who practice them are in need of a good spanking. These people, according to Jesus, will forever be tied to the Matrix, and fated to eternal punishment by repeating their lives over and over again here on Earth. Oh, and a bit of a side note here, Jesus in this book isn't really the son of Yaldabaoth. He is Forethought disguised as a human being who comes down to Earth to preach about the benefits of speculation within religious institutions and the upturning of certain philosophies to craft a brand new narrative. However, John was not the favorite apostle of Jesus in this narrative. And in fact, he kept on going with the biblical narrative spoon-fed to him by the Pharisees up until Jesus came back after his crucifixion to explain to him all of the aforementioned mythology surrounding Gnosticism. Those of you who have been keeping up with relatively recent news regarding the Bible may know that in 2006, a new Gnostic narrative was discovered which pointed to the least likely person imaginable as a true favorite of Jesus Christ: Judas Iscariot.
Oh, wait, hold on there, Messiah.
I hear one of you saying as you try to tune out your parents arguing downstairs, threatening divorce for the umpteenth time this week.
Judas? The same one who sold out Jesus for a few pieces of silver? That guy who may have been a vampire according to the third Librarian movie? That one Dante says is personally being tormented by Satan himself in the ninth circle of hell?
Yep. Gnosticism has a way of turning the entire narrative on its head, doesn't it? So, yeah, the Gospel of Judas is a relatively recently discovered document which paints Judas in a new light as Jesus' favorite disciple for his willingness to learn about the God who is different from your God, as JC so eloquently puts it to the other apostles. The story goes that after Jesus says this, the others become upset and question him as to what he means by that, to which Jesus challenges the men to step forward if they, quote, represent the perfect man. None of the apostles do so, except for Judas. not to state that he himself is perfect, but to tell Jesus that he knows who he really is, but is not worthy to speak the name of the one who sent him. That being Barbello. From then on, Jesus and Judas start having secret fireside chats where he is informed about the true nature of the universe, why Jesus was sent to Earth in the first place, and how to join the Aeons in the world of forms. From there, they hatch a conspiracy where Jesus asks for Judas to turn him into the Roman authorities so that he may be put to death and freed from his human form before Yaldabaoth gets word of his heretical teachings, and thus explains why Jesus knew of Judas' betrayal ahead of time at the Last Supper, and recontextualizes the fallen apostle from the servant of the devil to the most altruistic of the bunch, and the one who, in making Jesus a martyr, will set off a chain of events where the Matrix will eventually wake up to the true nature of the universe and be relieved of its inferiority, thus making it the 13th and last heaven. A paradise realm with not Jesus Christ, but Judas Iscariot as its appointed ruler. Yeah, there's a good reason why some evangelicals think that Gnostics are worse than atheists. Hence there is reason as to why Gnosticism is deemed heretical by most churches that know what the hell it is, and why so many prominent historical Gnostics were put to death by the early church in an attempt to consolidate their doctrine and save face amongst their fledgling followers. This is in rather stark contrast to where the church was around 100 or so years after the death of Jesus, as evidenced by the career of Valentinus of Rome, a holy man who actually became Bishop of Rome, which means that in an alternate reality, Gnosticism is the mainstream for Christianity, and the whole God is a perfect and infallible being narrative would likely have taken Gnosticism's place as the offshoot, somewhat kooky philosophy to be snuffed out by church leaders in the years to follow. Educated in Alexandria, Egypt in the early 1st century, Valentinus was very familiar with Greek philosophy, specifically Plato's theory of forms. While his teachings weren't word-for-word copies of the SBJ, Valentinus taught that the true divine salvation was brought about by the Word of God, and that in order to escape the false reality around them, they would need to reject materialism and accept that the world was created for evil purposes, which flew right in the face of later Roman Christians, specifically Irenaeus, Bishop of Lyons. These people, in good Christian practice, burned the writings of Valentinus and condemned him as a heretic post-mortem. However, not everything was destroyed, as the Gnostic tradition lives on, with the narrative of a divine, perfect God presiding over the god of this ugly, imperfect, and sinful earth, living on in the eternal conflict of Satan versus Yahweh. The latter of which you can learn more about here in this video, and also in inspiring nerds like me to write scripts which carry on for far too long for the purpose of getting some clicks on a website I am convinced is staffed by communists. Thank you all so very much for watching today's video, and an extra special thank you to patron Nomafer for his generous contribution to the channel, and for finally twisting my arm enough to talk about Gnosticism in detail on this channel. You are simultaneously my biggest fan, and the bane of my existence. Additional thanks to my other Patreon backers who are named right over here. If any of you folks at home want to see your own video idea put into production, head over to my Patreon page linked down below where you can learn how to make that dream come true. You can also join our Discord server where mythology nerds gather together to share memes, art, and other nonsense vaguely associated with mythology. Link is also in the description. Finally, I'd like to thank the viewers at home and remind you that if you'd like the content I produce here, be sure to like the video, share it with a friend, and subscribe if you haven't already, as all of these things really help out with the channel and me as a person. And with all that being said, ladies and gentlemen of the internet, my name is Messiahs in Mythology, and I hope you all have a God's blessed day.
Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 right up your machine.